And joining us now is Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse. Senator Sasse is the author of The Vanishing American Adult, Our Coming-of-Age Crisis, and How to Rebuild a Culture of Self-Reliance. He joins us from New York. Senator, why do you think James Comey was fired?
I'm not sure how this president makes lots of decisions, so I honestly don't know. But I do know that we are in the midst of a civilization warping crisis of public trust, and we need to talk honestly about our institutions that need to be restored and need to have the ability for people in 5 and 8 and 10 years to trust these institutions. So there are lots of reasonable arguments people can make about the way Director Comey made decisions in the midst of the unprecedented complexities of the 2016 election cycle. And lots of people can think that the Director Comey, who is a fundamentally honorable man, but people can think that he executed his job in all sorts of clunky and imperfect ways. That's a different question than whether or not he should have been fired the way he was last week, and I've been critical of that decision. I think it exacerbates the erosion of trust in our institutions. So I'm disappointed in the timing of the firing, but I want to preserve room that there's lots of reasonable reasons that people across the political spectrum can argue about the way the FBI leadership conducted its business in the 2016 cycle.
Help me understand a little bit more about your point about the institutions and the way in which this was handled, recognizing your point that this is really separate from the merits of Comey's handling of the email investigation, but his firing, explain how that challenges institutions in your view.
Well, here's one of the things that D.C. is just constantly head in the sand about, which is that we've got a bunch of different institutions that have 9% and 12% and 15% public trust and public approval. America can't work that way because we need a shared narrative about who we are as a people, what government can and can't do, and what the beating heart of the First Amendment and free press and freedom of assembly and speech and religion means to us. We need to have a shared civic understanding of America before we get to partisan and policy differences. There are important fights to be had in policy, but we first need a civic sense of what America is. And here's what comes next in things like Russian interference in America and in other countries in the age of cyber war over the next decade. I'm obviously concerned about 2016, but I'm far more concerned about 2018 and 2020, because here's what comes next. John Dickerson decides to run for office in 2018, and all of a sudden your credit card records get dumped in some sort of a cyber hack leak, and 97% of those records are going to be real, and there's going to be texture to it, and you were in City X on this day, and you were in City Y on this other date, but 3% of the records are going to be fabricated, and they're going to be interwoven. And John, you've been spending a lot of money at a women's clothing store in Chattanooga, but your wife isn't in Chattanooga. So that's weird. And then there's public doubt about you. And then 5 days later, your phone records are dumped and they're 99% accurate, but 1% you're calling a brothel in Chattanooga on Tuesday nights when your wife's at Bridge Club. That's what's coming next in the era of cyber war. And we're going to need to have some institutions that we can rely on and believe are apolitical when the public has more and more doubt. And right now, Washington isn't at all focused on the long-term challenge of rebuilding a shared narrative about America and institutional trust in our servants.
Let me ask you in specific terms with this case. Another institution that's kind of been drawn into the conversation this week has been the Department of Justice. There's the Deputy Attorney General who put his reputation and the weight of the Department of Justice on a set of theories that now seem not to have been the entire reason for James Comey's firing. I wonder if you see that as a potential threat to the independence and the reputation of that institution.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of politicization going on at the Department of Justice over the last 5 to 8 and 9 years as well. And so we should want the Department of Justice to be very, very insulated from partisan politics. We have 3 branches of government, not 1, not 17, right? And so you need to have investigative and prosecutorial functions be in the Article 2 branch of government. They need to be in the executive branch, but there should be lots of insulation from the career civil servants and the leadership of the Justice Department from political decision-making at the White House. And so I don't think, I'm the chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, so there are a number of things I don't want to say yet before we have Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein before us. But there's a lot that we need to understand better about how this happened.
Before we leave, let me ask you about your book, The Vanishing American Adult. You see a very serious problem here for America. Explain what you mean. It's a non-political problem.
Yeah, so this book is 100% not about politics, and it's 99% not about policy. It's about this new category of perpetual adolescence. And first, let's just say that over the last 2 millennia or so, the emergence of a category called adolescence is a pretty special gift. We believe that when our kids become biological adults, when they hit puberty, they don't have to be fully formed morally, emotionally, economically, educationally, in terms of household structure. They don't have to go out and be fully adult immediately. They don't have to go off to war, and they don't have to become economically self-sufficient. That's glorious, to have that protected space between childhood and adulthood, but it's only glorious if you understand that it's a transitional state. It's a means to an end. Peter Pan's Neverland is a hell. It's a dystopia, and we don't want to have our kids caught at a place where they're not learning how to be adults, and right now we're not tending to the habit formation aspects of a republic.
All right, Senator Sasse, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll be back in 1 minute with our political panel.